Good day, everyone, and welcome back to the branding experience. We are now into week 3. So let's get right into it, and let's talk about what the game plan is for today. So the game plan today is we're going to talk about why we brand a product, the importance of a strong brand, why is that key, brand equity, so how much it's worth. We'll talk about that. Make my thing a little smaller. Logos and slogans. This is a common one. A lot of people is a fan of these. You kind of really see how companies use certain logos and slogans to kind of attract you. And then we're going to wrap up with how do you protect your brand and your slogans, and then we'll wrap up with some homework. All right, that's the game plan for today. So let's get into it, and let's talk about why we brand a product. So there's a great little quote here where Warren Buffett talks about where it takes 20 years to build a reputation, but only 5 minutes to ruin it. Okay, so if you think about it, you would do things differently. So when you're protecting your brand, so the definition, any ideas why you think we should brand a product? Like, why should we do that? I think it's important to get back is how do you define branding, right? And we use the one word, reputation. So if we want to have a good reputation, it's great to have something to associate it to, something physical that you can see, right? So let's look at the definition. So building a brand that has distinctive but authentic image is important to success in the short term and the long term. So it's key, right? So we want to have some longevity. We spend all this time and energy in branding a product. We need to make sure that it can last short term, so currently, and also importantly, long term, right? And so there's some specific keys that make a really good brand, and let's look at those now. So the importance of a strong brand. So here's an example that McDonald's did. Stanford University did for McDonald's. And they offered 2 identical French fries. So they were identical, right? The fries themselves were the same. And they offered to children. Any guesses which one the children chose? Yeah, so 77% chose the McDonald's French fries just because of the packaging. No other reason, because it's associated. That's the importance of a strong brand. And you might think of ones that maybe apply to you, that if someone asked you, say, for example, pizza, and I gave you one that's in a no-name box, where maybe it implies that it's a frozen, versus, say, one that's maybe Domino's or Pizza, you would always tend to favor towards that brand. Soda pop, exactly the same. The Coca-Cola brand is such a strong brand when you're drinking of Coca-Cola versus a no-name brand, even though they might be taste the exact same. And that is why we make a strong brand and why we protect it. And we're going to look at that in a minute. So let's look at these brands, and I want you to think about what comes to mind and maybe what you associate it with. So let's go to the first one here. So Instagram, some things that might come to mind. Photos. And then we're going to go back and just associate these. Maybe, sorry, I'm going to leave that up there. Photos. Anything else? Videos, maybe. Right? Now, what target market? Teen, say middle age, right? Younger. All right. So that's Instagram. Let's look at Twitter here. What comes to mind with this? You might think celebrities, because that's common. Sorry, I can't fit it all in there. Celebrities. Some might think business. And these are some words that have come from other classes, so I'm just associating from my other students. An older generation. Anything else? Maybe maybe something that's not so heavy-hearted. So it's kind of important. If that's a word. Well, important's a word, but does it actually? It's news and companies and governments use Twitter a lot for feeds, right? Facebook. Right away, I know what you guys are thinking. You're going to think memes, advertising, right? A lot of you might have got out of using, you probably not even have a Facebook account. Definitely older crowd, right? Parents, maybe even your grandparents might have a Facebook account, for sure, right? You can look at they have actually groups. And actually now you're looking even more at marketplace, which is having a huge impact. No? What about Pinterest? Crafty, right? Creative. Older generation. Some of you still may have one, but generally your demographic's probably a little bit older. What about this one? Yeah, Snapchat. So you're looking at younger groups, possibly. Communication, because I know a lot of your younger generation is using it from a communication standpoint. Anything else that comes to mind that might come to mind when you're seeing these? Now, when you start looking at these brands, it's important to kind of look at why the importance of them, right? Because they want to direct it, especially Facebook. There's a lot of talk about Facebook over the few years, and whether it's something that people are starting to shy away from because they don't trust it. And I think Facebook is really trying to battle that. What's the word I'm looking for? That reputation of being that brand, because there was a while back, a few years, where they were struggling, right? When Instagram got launched, and then you saw Snapchat, right when all that started getting rolled out, they were struggling quite a bit. I think they've recouped it a little bit now. They put some things in place, but still they're kind of on the fence. And some people, the brand is always, because them being the number one social media, I think all the eyes are on them, right? Twitter falls by the wayside a little bit. Pinterest, you don't hear anything about them. Instagram, no real issues going along with that. Snapchat, and the latest one being TikTok, coming out to compete. So I think it's important that when you're looking at these brands and when you have them, that you're marketing them towards the right demographic that you want them to be, right? All right, let's look at some other brands. So brand equity. So this brand, Google, right? So let's define brand equity first of all. So it's the commercial value, right? So how much it's worth, or the value that derives from the product. So if the company has multiple brands, it could be from just the one brand, the entire company, or if they have multiple ones, it could be both, right? Or one. But it's interesting. Look at the value of this brand. It's not what the company's worth. It's what the brand is worth. So, if you had that brand and you for example, you had that, you created the Google logo years ago, that is what it would be worth. Kind of crazy when you think of just the letters and the color and the word Google has that brand rec value of over $309 million. Let's look at some others, especially currently during COVID now. There are quite a few brands that have changed hands, especially during COVID. This one being the biggest. Amazon has come up to be worth $220 billion because of the online shopping that has exploded. But still, almost double of what Google is worth. Apple, Microsoft. Whoever thought that someday that Walmart would be it's only 77 billion, right? A third of what Amazon. So you look at it from a competition standpoint, it's the value that Amazon has. And we'll look specifically at the logos in a little bit. Facebook, only 79 billion compared to Google, right? Or Apple. So it's interesting to see how much value or brand equity these companies can have associated with it, and they try to protect it. And that's why it's so important that happens. All right, moving right along. So logos and slogans. Okay, let's move on to that a little bit. So we talked about the brand themselves, but let's just specifically get into at least one of my favorite ones. So the logos are designs that a company uses to make their brand recognizable, right? So we'll look at some in a bit, but it's important. Some companies change them, right? And we need to make sure that we're cautious of that. Oops. And sometimes companies will make these changes. Maybe they're going in from a different marketing strategy. They're going in a new direction, right? Coca-Cola has touched on changing their brand, logos over the years. Nike is one. Nike went from, they used to be Just Do It. And they actually got rid of that, and they went with just a swoosh crew drawing. So that, right? So that it'll make it a little simpler, but to make it current, right? Up to date. Hence the update. So they want to update it to make it more current. And it's funny, when Nike did this, all the other sport and gun companies did the exact same, followed suit. So the next one actually, I think they both did it around the same time. So you saw Adidas. I'm going to see if we can draw it here. Not sure if I got this the right way. They went from Adidas and they just stuck with their logo. Right? Reebok did the same thing. Reebok's logo looks something like this. I think something. It's a really bad drawing of it. So Reebok, and they got rid of all their names underneath it. Under Armour is another company that just jumped right into it. They used to have to say Under Armour. Now they're starting to come back to it. If you see what was old is new again. So you're seeing Nike actually introduce the Just Do It. Under Armour is now actually putting in the logo. They're saying Under Armour. But you got to be careful, okay? Because sometimes companies are doing that, and it gives the perception that there's something wrong with the product. Sometimes you think, well, why change it? It was fine the way it is. So you got to be very careful, especially when you look at how much the brand equity was worth. Remember we talked about Google, and we talked about how expensive it could be. So if we're going to change it, we need to be very, very cautious. There's a lot of money those brands are worth. So we want to make sure that we do it cautiously so that we can always jump back. And some companies have done that. Coca-Cola has changed their brand with the logo a couple of times, and actually have come back to the old one. It was just too risky, and the feedback was that why change it? And if someone thinks why change it, then it kind of puts off the mind, maybe there's something wrong with it, right? Okay, so I have a video we're going to watch, and it talks about all these different brands. So really, I always like watching where logos and designs come from and stuff from it. It really opens your eyes, things that you may not have seen before. So we'll watch the video and then we'll talk a little bit about the logos in more detail.
These days, nearly everything you encounter from the time you get out of bed in the morning till you return to it at night is part of a brand. Your favorite restaurant has a brand, the shoes on your feet are branded, and yeah, even that bed you sleep on is branded. Even the non-branded stuff is kind of a brand, if you think about it. We know brands by their logos, visual calling cards that are instantly identifiable, at least if it's a good one. The really good ones tell a story and make an impact that changes the way you think about the products. They tell you what you're going to get, and they leave you feeling a certain something. And seeing them again brings that feeling back. While you're surrounded by the art and design of branding every day, you may not know much about the people and the stories behind the world's most famous logos. The Golden Arches, one of the most recognizable logos in the world. Their story didn't start in a corporate boardroom, but instead can be traced back to when McDonald's was just a small barbecue stand in California, owned by brothers Richard and Maurice McDonald in the 1940s. When the brothers realized that most of their sales were coming from hamburgers, they simplified their menu and focused on pioneering the fast food system. This new streamlined process proved successful. Business was so good, in fact, that in 1952 the brothers decided to open a second location. They wanted their new store to be eye-catching, but they also wanted to create an environment that encouraged customers to come in, finish their meal promptly, and then go about their day. The brothers worked with an architect named Stanley Clark Meston to design the new location. Richard quickly sketched half-circle arches to convey a sense of movement and speed, and Meston took it from there. They liked it so much that the arch design became a requirement for every franchise McDonald's opened in the 1950s.
This is kind of interesting that it was an arch, not the letter M. So it's always funny how where logos actually come from.
In the 1960s, McDonald's was looking to change its branding, and attempts were made to create a fresh new logo. But it was Jim Schindler, the company's head of engineering and design, who repurposed the Golden Arches into a stylized M. Even as the company's branding has changed with the times, the Golden Arches have remained a crucial part of the McDonald's brand, with 86% overall awareness in the top 10 countries that McDonald's surveyed in 2004. According to Stephen Von Worley, in the US, the furthest you can possibly be from a McDonald's location is 107 miles. So whether it's highway rest stops or busy cityscapes, you can't get very far without seeing those Golden Arches, harkening back to a dream between two brothers who inherited a family business over 75 years ago. Similar to the Golden Arches, the Nike swoosh is clean and clear and immediately evokes images of quickness and athleticism. The Nike brand is worth over $26 billion, but it may surprise you to find out that the logo only cost $35. In 1971, Carolyn Davidson, a graphic design student at Portland State University, was mentioning to a friend outside of class one day that she couldn't afford to take an oil painting class. One of the associate professors, Phil Knight, happened to be walking by and overheard. Knight asked Davidson if she'd be interested in doing some freelance work for Blue Ribbon Sports, a company he'd co-founded with track coach Bill Bowerman. Davidson agreed at the rate of $2 an hour. Part of the assignment was to come up with a logo for a shoe brand that they were working on. Knight wanted it to convey movement and motion, and Davidson's job was to make Knight happy while moving away from his obsession with the Adidas logo. Davidson tried hundreds of ideas, and while she admits that she doesn't quite know how long it took, she only charged for 17.5 hours of work. She'd sketch logos out on tissue paper and put them over shoes to see if they worked on the shoe itself. When Davidson presented her team members with various designs, nothing was particularly well received, but Knight kept coming back to the first design of the lot, the infamous swoosh. The brand was given the name Nike, and it took over a decade for Davidson to get the recognition she deserved. But in 1983, Nike threw a party in her honor and presented her with a diamond-encrusted gold ring with the swoosh on it, along with 500 shares of Nike stock, now worth well over $600,000. Some brands develop myths and legends around their origin stories. Even Apple, arguably the most famous tech company in the world, known for its focus on simplicity and function, doesn't have a clear and obvious history for its iconic logo. One urban legend insists that the apple itself is intended to evoke the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge from the book of Genesis. Another says it's a sly reference to Alan Turing, the grandfather of computing whose research broke German codes during World War II. Prosecuted for his homosexuality, Turing committed suicide by eating an apple poisoned with cyanide. Rob Janoff, the creator of the logo, admits that he doesn't know the exact reason why Apple was named Apple, but suggested it's possibly because Steve Jobs once lived on a farm in Northern California with an apple orchard. A look back at the very first Apple logo might provide a touch more clarity on this. The first logo was designed by Apple's co-founder Ronald Wayne. This logo features a hand-drawn illustration of Sir Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree with the conspicuous apple hanging right above him. According to legend, Newton devised the theory of gravity after being struck by a falling apple. The idea was solid, even if the logo itself was complex, but Steve Jobs wasn't really a huge fan, so they hired Janoff in 1977 to design a simpler one. The initial version featured rainbow stripes. According to Janoff, the rainbow colors were added to make the products look more user-friendly, appealing to school children, and to emphasize the Apple II's ability to show images in color. The logo has undergone only the slightest of changes over the years, and is easily one of the most identifiable in history. But it does make one wonder, if the apple doesn't represent Eve or Alan Turing, why is there a bite taken out of it? In a 2016 interview, Rob Janoff offered a simple explanation. I was going for the silhouette of an apple, but to make it look more like an apple and not some other round fruit, I did what one does with an apple. I took a bite out of it. If you've studied logo design at all, you're probably expecting us to talk about FedEx. Okay, fine. The FedEx logo we all know and love had a long journey to fruition. The first logo, created in the early 1970s by Richard Runyon, showcased in thick letters the company's full name, Federal Express. That logo was certainly bold, but it looked a bit too much like something out of Tron to age very well. In 1994, a designer from the brand consulting agency Landor Associates by the name of Lyndon Leader began work on a new simplified design focused on clarity. In an interview published in The Laws of Subtraction, Leader said this about the FedEx logo. Early sketches always have too much going on, too much to think about, and too much extraneous stuff. I slowly begin to remove things, but it's always the final one that's far more simple and far more clear than the more elaborate ones I labored over at the beginning. Once FedEx approved changing their name, Leader's team got to work. Everyone knows that the FedEx logo features a hidden spoon, but did you know there's also a hidden arrow? As Leader was experimenting with fonts, he noticed the outline of an arrow appear between the E and the X. Using two different fonts as a base, he tweaked the kerning until the arrow appeared to fit naturally. But not everyone understood that the value of the design was how understated it was. In that same interview, Leader recounts, FedEx's PR firm immediately wanted to supersize it. They wanted to make it obvious, fill it in with another color. They didn't get it. It wasn't about the arrow. An arrow isn't even interesting to look at. It's only because of the subtlety that it's intriguing. Luckily for FedEx and design trivia connoisseurs everywhere, good sense won out, and Leader's design went on to become a legend in the logo world. He says the most rewarding aspect of the design is when children first see the arrow by themselves and point it out to their parents. That kind of recognition is exactly what branding and logo design are all about. Michael Beirut, partner at the acclaimed design agency Pentagram, said, "People forget that a brand new logo seldom means a thing. It is an empty vessel awaiting the meaning that will be poured into it by history and experience. The best thing a designer can do is make that vessel the right shape for what it's going to hold." If you're interested in learning more about branding and logos, you may want to check out some classes on Skillshare, like this class led by designer Aaron Draplin, where he explores the finer points of design, color, shape, and typography in logos. Whatever your interests, we've got a wide range of classes on Skillshare, from creating art to starting a business, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. You can start for free by clicking here, but if you'd just like to watch more videos, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell if you want to know right when we post. Or just tell us what you think of the Skillshare logo down in the comments.
So, good little history on brands. I like finding the histories, and you know, it's if anything comes from it, it shows how difficult it is to create a logo and to be effective with it, because some of the ones that we saw just popped up, right? It wasn't a whole lot of thought put into it. It was just kind of the obvious, especially the McDonald's one. I liked how it generated from the way you drove up towards the McDonald's. You could see that it looked like a couple of art, a letter M. So kind of cool. The FedEx one I liked as well. I never knew there was a spoon. I always saw the arrow, but I didn't know about the spoon. So lots of cool things when you really start looking into logos. We'll take another look at logos again, though. I want to look at colors. This is a common one that a lot of companies look at, and I'm just gonna up here, not blocking them on. When you're looking at psychologists, look at the colors, but when you're looking at red, it gives the impact of strength, passion, excitement. Yellow is intellect, joy, and energy. Blue, loyalty, trust, and intelligent. And last but not least, green, freshness, growth, and safety. Now I have my own spin on it, but it's interesting when you look at these logos and you tie them in. So this got blue and yellow, so it's a combination of two for. So it's joy, energy, loyalty. Home Depot being orange or / reddish, so there's strength with that. McDonald's being red and yellow, So again, with the energy and joy, passion, and strong. It's interesting, the two big companies in the world, you both use the yellow and not yellow, but sorry, the red or orangey colors in it, and they're both some of the strongest ones. Monster Energy being green. See, this is where it starts. Sometimes they fall apart. Wendy's using red again, so passion. Spotify, green. Red Bull, one of the largest energy drink companies out there, using combination of all three, which is really kind of interesting. Trying to get a little bit of everything. So I think the other part that's I'd like to add to this though as well. I'm going to let these go away for a sec. Whoops. Is the color blue. What comes to mind when you think of the color blue? So what comes to mind for me is recycling. And I think especially now, at a time when the environment is really important, I think blue has really taken off that way. So you could probably add that to it, and which makes the connection between these two. Because when you think of green, what do you think of? Yeah, so if you think environmentally friendly, let me pick a different color here so you can see it. Environmental friendly. That's key, right? I mean, we're using the word green in products. We'll say, "Oh, this product is green," making the association that it's good for the environment. So, I think from these definitions have expanded more, especially the blue and the green are becoming more popular than the red. And if you look at the companies that have used red in the past, they're older companies that have been around for years that definitely tie into being strong. But the newer companies, I think, are using blue and green so they can jump on the trends of what's current and what the new generations can associate with, right? All right. So let's have a little bit of fun. Let's check your knowledge and see how well you know slogans. We've talked about logos for a while. Let's look at slogans and see how strong they can be and why the importance of them. All right, so let's give this a go. It's just a little bit smaller. I'm loving it. Who's that? If you said McDonald's, you would be right. These. How about this one here? Banking can be this comfortable. Any guesses? If you guessed TD Bank, you would be correct. What about this one? Be a hero. Maybe for those extreme sports type of people might know this, especially if you have a certain camera. This would be GoPro. For you gamers out there, greatness awaits. PlayStation. This one has changed a little bit. They've changed the slogan over the years, but this is what it is currently in 2021. Save money, live better. If you guessed Walmart, whoops. Walmart, you would be correct. Your better starts here. This is a company that has changed this logo because of, not logo, their slogan many times, primarily due to changing of ownerships in the company and trying to keep it fresh and current. But this would be Sport Check. Have it your way, eat somewhere else. Any guesses? Burger King. How about this one? And this was kind of when talking to slogans, how they kind of have a, you can't say this one, which is interesting, without singing it a little bit. Um, they're magically delicious. Yes, Lucky Charms. Think different. You should all know this one. Apple. Considering over 80% of you people have Apple phones. And last but not least, Open Happiness, another company that is striving over the years, is kind of, I think, is struggling for many reasons, but not going to get into that today. But I've tried different slogans to keep them up to date and current. Open Happiness, this is a toughie. Coca-Cola is that one. All right. So it's interesting how some of these you may know right away. And that's why it's important not to just have a logo, but a slogan that ties into it. I mean, a few of these you can't say without singing it. I'm loving it is another one that you kind of sing along, and you might know some other ones. But cereal ones, for sure. Lucky Charms. They're magically, I just can't not say it, right? Without singing it. So it's interesting the power of certain words as soon as you, when you think about this, right? You put certain words together and it forces you to sing them. That's the power of a slogan and how it relates to a company with regards to their brand. I mean, it just adds to the brand that much more, right? Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about ways to make an effective slogan. So you need to be different, right? Can't be like any of the rest. It should be explaining the company's mission statement. So it needs to be connected to the company. It needs to kind of tie into it. Ties into what their goals are, where they want to go. Definitely needs to be short, right? Because if it's got to be memorable, it's got to tie in. It's got to be something that you can think of right away. It's not like, there's a whole bunch of sentences. A rhyme, a rhythm to it. I mean, that always helps. We talked about Lucky Charms, right? That you can't actually say it without singing it. And most importantly, at the end of the day, it needs to be true. Whatever comes to it, there has to be some truth to it that can relate to the brand itself. It's difficult sometimes because companies have spent millions of dollars protecting them, and you probably have heard many companies that have sued other companies because they're too close to each other, and it becomes a very difficult thing to create a new slogan or even a brand, not brand, but a logo for that matter, without copying somebody else. So let's look at how do we protect. So this is important. So you might have heard this terminology before, but when we have spent so much time on our logos and our slogans, we need to make sure that we can protect them. So two ways we can do that. When we want to protect symbols, words, or designs, it is known as a trademark. Okay? Or the TM logo that you might see on certain products. This is only good for 10 years. This has changed. It used to be only like 6. And every 10 years, you need to reinvest. And a trademark can cost anywhere into $60,000 up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. When you're looking at copyrights, this is when you're looking at writings and music and art or performances. That's copyrighted. This is good for 50 years. Currently, that's where it sits. So you only have to do this every 50 years. But trademarks, you got to update every 10 years. So those are your two areas that you can protect your trademarks. versus your copyright. So you need to understand. Sometimes you need to do both. Sometimes you got to do the trademark and you need to do the copyright, right? Because you're looking at specific artwork. So maybe in the actual logo itself, but you also have phrases tied with it, or specific words that you want to protect. And that becomes really challenging sometimes because, I mean, the English language only has so many words in it. And for a company to say, okay, I own that word, that becomes super challenging without people saying, so like, do you really own the word, right? So things to think about, and it does get very costly. And that's the key, what ties it, I talked about at the beginning of this video, where you spend so much time on your brands, so that it ties in with the logos and the slogans, and it all ties into the goals and mission statements, that you don't want to damage it. And it's such a huge risk that companies do when they change them up just a little bit, because you don't want to put that at risk. So let's just wrap up. So today's homework, you're going to review checklist number 3 on the modules. You're going to complete assignment number 3, video assignment. Okay. Again, do not actually have to do the video if you want. If you want to do it in a Word doc or a Google Doc, that's fine too. And last but not least, I need you to complete quiz number 2. And you will be all good. So I will see you guys in the next video. Stay safe.